Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Terry with College Football Stop. I bring you another show today. Obviously, today is October 11th, 2023. Uh, a couple things happened yesterday. Coaches met with the media, both Ryan Day and Jim Knowles, so we're going to get into some of that. And then a couple stock up, stock down for this Ohio State team after starting 5-0. Can't wait to get into that. And then, obviously, one of the big topics all over Twitter has been CJ Hicks going to play. So we'll get into that too. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I wanted to talk about was, like I said, the Ohio State coaches. They met with the media. The first one obviously was Ryan Day, and then there was Jim Knowles. Let's start with Ryan Day. One of the first things he was asked about was the offensive line issues, which that was another hot topic after the Maryland game. A lot of people wanted to talk about how bad the offensive line looked. I've been kind of defending them a little bit, saying they were not as bad as most people say. And I still believe that because I got to watch the All 22 film on Menace Patreon, Menace Sports Patreon. Um, Shout out to them. You know, it's a great product. You learn so much, and you don't really know what happens until you watch something like that. But anyway, he was asked about the offensive line issues, and he said that he doesn't think that they're schematic issues. He says that they just need to coach it better and execute it better. I don't hate that because if you watch the film, you can see that some of those plays are set up to be perfect. You know, if they're blocked properly, those are going to square it out for 10, 15-yard gains. And if the running back can just make one guy miss, then they could score on a play like that. But they're just not executing. It was actually really sloppy, the way that the offensive line played this weekend. I expected them to be, I would say, more like in sync by now. I don't really know what's going on, especially coming off of a bye week. You kind of would expect better. So I don't know. Yeah, that's what Ryan Day had to say. Basically, he said they need to execute better. And he was asked about the like second string offensive line, if any of those guys were pushing for playing time, and he kind of just shut that down and said no. And he said, I wish that those guys would, and kind of challenge them too. I don't mind a coach going up and saying like, look, the players got to execute better, as long as they're not saying that all the time, because ultimately it comes down to coaching. But there's nothing wrong with challenging your players. So I love that, and hopefully the offensive line will look better. I think that they will. Like I said, they were not as bad as most people try to make it out to be. There was a lot of other issues with the run game, which include like the running backs not seeing things well, and also some of the personnel choices. So we're running like two tight ends and kind of getting extra guys in the box, and then our tight ends are, I mean, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage just by doing that, especially if you don't have tight ends that are like blocking specialists, which Ohio State has Cade Stover, who is hit and miss sometimes with blocking, and then they have G. Scott out there, who was a former wide receiver. So I don't know. That was causing a lot of issues. But all right, we'll move on from that. Ryan Day said that Travion Henderson should be back this week, which I think I love that. I hope that he does come back. And then he said that Dallin Hayden will be redshirting, which that's another thing. Just we kind of expected that because we haven't seen Dallin Hayden play a lot this year. He's only, I think, been in the game like one time, had like one reception. So he still does have 3 games where he could play, and they could still redshirt him. So I do expect to see him in a game at some point. And hopefully that's not something that we need, which would mean that people got injured and stuff like that. Obviously, that's been an issue in the past. So I don't know. Dallin Hayden redshirting is fine to me because I think that he could end up being one of the star running backs on this team next year. Another thing, Ryan Day talked about injuries. Again, Travion Henderson, then Emeka Egbuka. He said it's not a long-term thing. So what I get from that is probably Emeka Egbuka is not going to be playing in this game versus Purdue this weekend. But I would expect to see him out there versus Penn State. And if not, then I would almost consider that a long-term thing if it's going to have to be a little longer than 2 games. But I don't know. He said it's not a long-term thing. So hopefully it's nothing big, and we'll see Emeka back out there. And then the last thing I want to talk about with Ryan Day, he was asked about special teams. I felt like some of the beat guys did a good job of asking the hard questions this weekend, because the special teams was really bad versus Maryland, and he talked about like or not fake, the um, punt where the snapper just kind of snapped it and it rolled on the ground. He said that he asked him about it, and he said it just slipped. So I don't know. Ryan Day was like, "Look, that can't happen again." And his big thing with the special teams is that he said we need to start holding the coaches and the players accountable, and hopefully he does that because I think that Ryan Day has been kind of a lackadaisical coach in his time at Ohio State. And I think that in order for this team to continue getting better, he's going to have to really crack down and kind of get after them. So hopefully that's what he's planning on doing. That was really it for Ryan Day. He was asked a lot of other stuff, but he just is kind of back to his old self now where it's just coach speak and he's not really saying much, making sure he's not saying much. And then moving on to what Jim Knowles had to say. Jim Knowles is a guy who will get up on the mic and he will talk and he doesn't use as much coach speak. Even when he does try to, he just is not great at it. So he still gives you little nuggets. The first thing that Jim Knowles was asked about was how are the linebackers playing, which that's again been a hot topic this week because the linebackers the last 2 weeks have kind of looked like a little bit of a liability. Um, I personally think that before we get into what Knowles said, I personally think that the linebackers are they're being asked to do different things than what they were last year, and I don't necessarily think that the things that they're being asked to do are their strengths, especially Tommy Eichenberg, because a lot of people were talking a lot of shit about Tommy Eichenberg this year, but we already know that he's a good player. We already seen him do it, so it's not like that. I don't think he got worse. I think that he's just being asked instead of being asked to attack and find the right spot to attack by reading the defense. He's being asked to wait and let the play develop a little bit and then attack. And by that time, the blocker's on the second level. And I don't think that either one of our linebackers have ever been phenomenal at shedding blocks. I think Tommy was good at it last year, but most of that was because Tommy was attacking and he knew where the ball was going to be going, so he could choose where he wanted to go and he could basically kind of beat the offensive lineman to their spot. But this year, that's not happening. And I mean, they are leading the team in tackles, both of them. You know, like I think Tommy has 36, Steele has 32 or something. The next closest is like 26. But when you're watching them play, Ohio State's kind of getting gashed in the run game a little bit, and a lot of it's falling on them. It looks like they're kind of not in the right gaps or they're getting there late. So I don't know. Anyway, Jim knows when he was asked about it, he said he thinks they're playing well, which it all depends. Like if that's what he's asking them to do is like take on blocks at the second level and I don't know, try to get off of it. I don't really know I don't know everything schematically, but he says they're playing well. And when he was asked about like what they're doing, the main thing that he really talks about is like them being able to call out checks on the defense and stuff like that, which I get that. You need that. You need the quarterback of the defense, but I think that that player is Tommy Eichenberg. I don't necessarily think that that's Steel Chambers doing that. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you watch the game, you can see Tommy Eichenberg is out there looking at the offense and then deciding what the defense should be doing. So I don't know. He feels like they're playing well. I don't. Most people that I talk to don't. Any grading site like PFF thinks that they're not. So I don't know. Maybe we're all just confused about what Jim Knowles is asking them to do. And then Knowles was asked about Jack Sawyer too, because again, for whatever reason, the people have, all over have just been really upset about the defensive ends this year, thinking that they've been playing terrible. And I don't necessarily think that. But he was asked about Jack Sawyer, and he said Jack Sawyer is doing everything that we're asking him to do, which is kind of how I've been looking at it this whole time with the defensive ends. You can tell by looking at them that they're not just out there trying to get after the quarterback or just get past someone to make a play in the backfield. It seems like they're being asked to set the edges. It seems like they're being asked to make sure they're super gap sound, and that's what they've been doing. Now, last game we saw JTT a little bit where it seemed like he was freestyling a little more, and he looked like a really good player, like I expected. I think that Jack Sawyer has some of that in him too, but he's also kind of that bigger body, more sturdy built defensive end, and I think they're asking him to be a run supporter most of the time, and he's been good in run support. So I don't know. I do think that having maybe Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau on one side rotating, and then having Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry rotating opposite side, especially for passing downs, I think that could really benefit this defense. But I don't think the Sawyer's been some terrible player like a lot of other people think. All right, and then one of the topics for the for the entire show we're going to get into now because it was something Jim Knowles had to say. With the linebackers not playing as good as they have been, or sorry, not playing as good as they should be, Jim Knowles was asked about C.J. Hicks and if is he ready to play or what's going on with him. And basically, what Jim Knowles had to say was that C.J. Hicks is ready to play. He's been doing a good job, but the guys in front of him are veterans. And the person he was speaking to even asked him a question back, like, "So you're saying Tommy and Steele are just more experienced?" And he said, "Don't forget Cody Simon too. He's a veteran also." So the problem with this statement from Jim Knowles though is that being a veteran is not the end all be all on whether you should be playing or not. And I get that having those guys out there that can maybe read the defense a little better, can call things out better. I get that that's going to help the defense overall, but I don't think that you need to have two of those guys out there. And Jim Knowles actually said himself in the before the season started this year, he was in a press conference and he said himself that they're going to unleash CJ Hicks. So let me play that for you, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this. So I'm going to go ahead and play you the actual clip from Jim Knowles and what he had to say. So let's do that now.
And CJ is a guy who, I'm predicting sometime this season we're going to see him really unleash. And the good thing is he's not pressed in the service because of the veterans in front of him, and I think that's helped him to be able to play more relaxed. But at some point this year, we'll be able to see CJ's athletic ability. I mean, I think he's just on the cusp of breaking out.
All right, so obviously Jim Knowles said himself that he plans on or predicts, however you want to say it. You don't just say that because this was unprompted too. That's something that I have to let you know. This was something that Jim Knowles was not asked about. Are you going to unleash C.J. Hicks? He was asked basically like, how are those guys looking? C.J. Hicks and Gabe Powers, the younger guys, and he said, I predict that C.J. Hicks is going to be unleashed this year, and that's if that's what you're predicting, then why are we not even playing him in a situation where the game is out of hand, or even mixing him in for a series and kind of seeing how things look? Because what I personally think is, I think that if CJ Hicks gets on the field, I think, especially if you put him out there with Tommy Eichenberg, I think that he's going to go out there and start making plays, and you're not going to be able to take him off the field. There's no way that kid's been playing football his whole entire life. He was a 5-star all everything player, top 10 to 15 player in the entire country. He knows how to play football. You can't tell me that this defense is so complicated that someone who's been playing football their entire life can't understand it. You just simply cannot say that. And I think that we need to see him play. I posted on Twitter too, and I said if we don't see CJ Hicks this weekend, we riot. I'm just talking shit, but again, when Ohio State's getting in games where the talent is matched up and you have superior athletes on the other team also, these linebackers are just not keeping up. And CJ Hicks is going to be a guy who that's not going to be a problem with. And not to mention, if you have an athlete on the other team as a quarterback, you look at Tualia Tagovailoa, he was kind of causing some problems in the run game for Ohio State. You need linebackers who are athletes who can hang with that guy. And when I look at him, what that makes me think of is J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. You look at the last year, I said it before, but Ohio State made the adjustments in the third quarter last year, and then J.J. McCarthy started running on them, and then they had to make an adjustment to that, and then they were able to bust some big run plays. Again, if you don't have the athletes in the middle of the field that can run that guy down, you're going to run into an issue. And I'm not saying that Tommy and Steele are bad athletes, but if you look at C.J. Hicks, you can just tell that he's different. And having a guy like that just cooking on the bench doesn't make sense to me. I hope that he gets to play because I think that, like I said, he's going to go out there and make some plays and make it to where they can't take him off the field. And that may hurt some people's feelings, but I'm sorry. Whatever, it is what it is. Like, it's Ohio State. These kids are getting paid to be here now. So, I mean, you can't really just take someone's feelings into consideration. But again, I'm looking for him to be on the field. And if he goes out there and he stinks it up, then whatever he does, that's fine. He takes more time to develop and then we move on. But if he goes out there and looks like a superstar, then there's no reason to not have that on your defense, especially when your aspirations are to beat Michigan, go to the playoffs, and play against some of the best teams in college football. You're going to need athletes like that to make plays. All right, so I'm going to move on from that. Again, that was the topic right there that kind of got Twitter all riled up because people were just really upset that Jim Knowles came out and said with his words that CJ Hicks is not playing because those other guys are older than him. Those other guys are veterans. And they're veterans not necessarily even because they're older than him, because they have more game reps than him. But the reason they have more game reps than him is because of you not playing him. So, I mean, again, do you think that if CJ Hicks got all the blowout reps last year and then the more reps in the games this year that we were never in threat of losing, don't you think he would be a better player now and he would be almost considered a veteran? I mean, you're talking about halfway through a sophomore season of a guy who's probably only going to be here for 3 years. So you're talking halfway through. So 1.5 years out of his 3 years, he's not playing because he's not a veteran. So what, next year he's just going to automatically be a veteran? Or what, are we not going to play him next year and then let him transfer out and go somewhere that is going to utilize his talent, his athletic ability? And then what is that? Are we not going to ever recruit 5-star players anymore because they have to worry about not being able to play until their 3rd or 4th year? I don't know. They need to do something about that, and I hope that the change happens this week, and I hope that we see him out there at least rotating in or second half. I think he needs to be out there in the first half. I mean, what's going to happen? Is that one player being out there that's a freak athlete going to make you lose this game? It's not. It's just simply not. And if it is, then your team sucks, and I mean, your goals are not realistic if that's the case. All right, so moving on here. Again, that's just a hot topic, and it gets me a little frustrated because, I mean, that kid loves Ohio State. That's another thing, too, that I know I keep going back to it, but that's another thing that just has to factor in my opinion, too, is that you have this kid who fucking loves Ohio State. He's from Ohio. Those are the type of kids we need in the Michigan game. Do you think that, all right, I don't know if this is true, but I'm just going to say, at least before they came here, let's say before these two players came to Ohio State, who do you think cared more about the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry? CJ Hicks or Steel Chambers? Steel Chambers is from like the Atlanta area in Georgia. CJ Hicks is from Columbus, is an Ohio State fan his whole life. I know that doesn't impact how they play on the field, but bringing guys like that in, they need to be able to play. All right, I'm moving on. I'm done talking about it for real this time. Sorry, I know I just was ranting about that, but that topic gets me. It doesn't make sense to me. So, all right, let's move on to some stock up and stock down for this Ohio State team after 6 weeks, 5 games. You know, obviously they have the off week. So I'm gonna go stock up, stock down, stock up, stock down. Go in that order. So the first stock up that I have is gonna be an obvious one, and it's for Josh Proctor. Josh Proctor has been a beast this year. Honestly, if he keeps playing at the way that he's playing right now, he's going to be in contention for like the Thorpe Award. He's been that good, and he's been solid in run support. He's been solid in coverage. I wish I had the graphic up. I seen a thing earlier talking about Josh Proctor in coverage this year. I think he's only gave up like 1 catch. Obviously, he has 1 interception, 1 touchdown, multiple pass breakups. I mean, again, for a guy who I'd say most people, including myself, probably wrote him off and thought that he was not going to ever play here after because he's like a 6-year guy. I always knew that he had the athleticism to do it, but obviously there was something that was holding him back. And it seems like they were able to fix that. Perry Eliano, again, give you your flowers because Proctor's looked really good this year. And he's one of those guys that's a game changer. He's one of those freak athletes that I was just talking about, like a CJ Hicks. Again, those types of guys change games, and Josh Proctor definitely changed the game against Maryland because Ohio State probably wasn't going to score. They definitely were not going to score a touchdown, but they may not have scored at all in the first half, and they could have been down like freaking 20-0 or 20-3 if he doesn't get a pick 6. So huge stock up for him. And then a stock down. This is kind of one we just talked about, but Ohio State's linebackers, stock down for them. I think that as a linebacker, you have to be able to do multiple things. You have to be able to be aggressive. You also have to be able to read and react what they're being asked to do now. And I expected them to be really good this year after having a really good year last year, and then just having that more development and more time in the defense. But I don't necessarily think that they've been better. So I say stock down for the linebackers, especially after the last two games that they had. And then moving back to a stock up, my stock up is going to go to TreVeyon Henderson. And this is coming after a week that he didn't play. But him not playing, I think, had a huge impact on what Ohio State's run game capabilities were. And I think that it also impacts the run scheme that they do when you don't have a guy like him out there, because he creates a lot of issues where if you let him get to the second level, it might be gone. Chip has that in him, but hasn't shown it much this year. And then obviously Mayan Williams is kind of your bruiser back. But I think that not having TreVeyon Henderson out there had a big impact on Ohio State's run game this week. And I think that it just kind of proved that he is a huge impact, he has a vital impact on this offense and what it's capable of. And when I talk about this, I always like to go back to the Notre Dame game. TreVeyon Henderson in that game was getting the extra yards when he needed to. And then if you look back at that game, if he doesn't bust that one play, obviously you can't take plays away. But if he doesn't bust that one play for a touchdown, what does that game look like? Does Ohio State score on that drive? Because they didn't score on any other drive the rest of the game except for the very last one. So I would say no, probably not. So if that doesn't happen, then Ohio State loses that game 14-3. I could not imagine what social media would look like if Ohio State lost the game 14-3 to Notre Dame. So now this is actually a good transition, because if Ohio State had lost that game 14-3, the next guy that I'm talking about probably would not be in the position he's in anymore. So stock down for me on Kyle McCord. The reason I say stock down is coming into the year, I was not super stoked about Kyle McCord. I was hoping that he would be better than he is. However, he kind of started off bad and then had a game against Western Kentucky where I was like, okay, I can see it. Some of it's there. He's looking decent. He's getting more comfortable. He's named the starter now. He goes out against Notre Dame, and honestly, I think that he had a bad game. I know that he finished the game off with the game-winning drive, but in that same drive, he also threw two balls straight to defenders that could have been intercepted. And then you come into this game, and the first half was terrible. The second half was decent until the late fourth quarter, and then they just had guys running wide open downfield. They were scheming them up at that point. And to his credit, he was hitting those guys, and he made the one throw to Marv on the sideline that was a dime. So whatever, to his credit there. But overall, I think that he's a little too shaky in the pocket, and he's not seeing the field well, and he can't make every single throw, or at least consistently. So I have stock down on Kyle McCord right now. I hope to see that go up as the year goes on, because honestly, if it doesn't, Ohio State's going to be in a tough spot. So. All right, and then the next one, I have two more here. So one more stock up, one more stock down. Next stock up I have is Ohio State's defensive ends. This is a subject that's been a hot subject all year. People have been saying that they're not very good. They're not playing well. Larry Johnson's not doing what he's supposed to do. And I've been on the opposite fence of that they've been doing what they're asked to do, and they've been doing a hell of a job in run support, which it can't be underestimated, especially when you're playing teams that are just not great passing teams. If you don't have a great passing team, they're not going to drop back to pass a ton. And then they played against a team that was better at passing this week, and they were wreaking havoc on them. Kenyatta Jackson drew a hold. JTT had, I don't know how many pressures, but I know he had one sack. He was in Tualia's face all day, and he was kind of shutting down half of their run game by crashing down the line when they were doing those RPOs or zone reads or whatever. So yeah, again, stock up for the defensive ends. I didn't see Jack Sawyer do much in this game against Maryland, but you look at the other guys that came in, Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, and they both looked really good. They looked twitchy. So stock up for that unit, and I think that they're going to, as the year goes on, I think that they're going to become more and more impactful, and you're going to see that Ohio State does have one of the best defensive lines in college football because we already know that those interior guys are just dominant, and they have been all year. All right, so moving on to the last stock that I have here, stock down for Ohio State's personnel choices. So obviously we already talked about the defensive choices about having CJ Hicks out there, or even some of the choices on the defensive line. However, what I'm talking about when I say personnel choices is mostly on offense, and I don't know why we go into certain games and the plan is to run a ton of 12 personnel. I don't get it. Like we're supposed to have all these great wide receivers at Ohio State. We have the best wide receiver coach in the country, and yet we're going to take one of those guys off the field and we're going to put G. Scott out there. Again, I don't have any personal issue with G. Scott. I think that he's done phenomenal this year. He's done what he's been asked to do. This game wasn't his best game at Maryland. However, he's been a good blocker all year, and I would assume that he's good in the receiving game because he was a wide receiver coming out of high school, and they don't really throw him the ball much. But again, I don't like the fact that we are running so much 12 personnel just simply because you're bringing an extra man in the box. We're trying to run out of that, and then when we're throwing the ball, we don't have the best players that are like the best unit on our team. We don't have them on the field, so it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I hope that they'll run more of that 11 personnel and have the 3 wide receivers out there. Even running out of that, I think, is a better option, just simply because you're not bringing so many guys in the box. And right now, the offensive line is struggling with communication and they're struggling with working as a unit. The worst thing that you could do for an offensive line that is not really working as a unit well is to bring more guys in the box and complicate things more. So I think if they spread that out a little bit and use that as use that as a way to help them run the ball, and then also having those wide receivers out there as threats, I just think that's the best thing that they can do. I'm not saying do that all the time. Obviously, mix in a 12 personnel every now and then. But for me, it felt like we were in 12 personnel way more than we were in 11 personnel in this Maryland game. And if you think back to the last game that it felt like that, that would have been the Indiana game where Ohio State's offense really was sluggish and not good. So again, I think that that's not our best personnel set. I hope that Ryan Day sees that. Now I do like. I know this is a stock down, but I do like the 2 back personnel. I think it's like 21, where this time they had Chip and Mayan out there. Usually they run it with Chip and Trey. I do like that, and I even like the little running back jet sweep because you can do a lot of things off of that. If you run that once, then you could fake that, have the quarterback roll out, or you could fake that, hand it off to the running back that's in the backfield. So I like that, but again, the 12 personnel crap, I don't know why. I don't know why Ryan Day wants to do it so bad, but it's just not working. I don't think that we have the guys to do it. Like I don't think that G. Scott is one of the best 11 offensive players that we have. Put it that way. I like him. I like everything about that kid, but again, I don't think he's one of the best 11 offensive players we have. And when you're putting him on the field, and he honestly he's never been a threat to catch a ball downfield. So again, you're just creating all kinds of chaos, and I feel like it's unnecessary. All right, so that was it for my stocks. Again, just some good and some bad, and that was kind of for the whole season so far. I want to revisit that a little bit later in the year and kind of see, maybe in a couple weeks actually after like the Penn State game, and kind of see if any of these stocks change, and kind of what the temperature of the team is at that point. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to get into here was just my daily stat dive. I wanted to look at Ohio State, actually the Big Three and the Big Ten. So Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. I wanted to kind of look at the defenses and what they're doing this year, and because I mean honestly, they have 3 of the best defenses in the country, and those teams are all going to play each other. And I think that every offense, even Michigan, their vaunted offense everyone is talking about, I think that their offense is going to run into some issues versus Penn State and versus Ohio State. And again, it's just going to be a defensive battle for these teams. So let's get into some stats here. Looking at looking at the rushing defense, starting with Penn State. So Penn State is averaging or allowing 2.6 yards per carry, which that's really good. Michigan's 3.1, Ohio State is 3.1. So all very similar, but Penn State's is better, and I think that's kind of the trend. Their defense looks like the best defense out of the three. Obviously, opponents do matter in this situation. Now, the one thing I do notice is that Penn State and Michigan, both of their defenses are a little more ball disruptive, I would say, than Ohio State's. If you look at like fumbles forced, Penn State has forced 7 fumbles, and Michigan has forced 6. Ohio State has forced only 3, and I think maybe all 3 of those were in the Western Kentucky game. But again, I mean, being ball disruptive is an important thing. Michigan does also have an extra game, so because Penn State and Ohio State have played 5, Michigan has played 6, so that could equal out. But again, being ball disruptive is huge. It seems like all 3 of these teams have really solid run games. So I mean, run rush defenses. Sorry, all 3 of them have solid rush defenses, and I think that any team is going to struggle to run the ball on them. I do want to let's flip over and look at the passing defenses. Penn State is actually the highest on this one too. So again, like I said, I think they have the best defense in the Big Ten so far, and that could change as the year goes on. So Penn State's averaging 5.0 yards per attempt. Their defense is allowing. I'm sorry, I keep getting it all confused up, but anyway, Penn State's defense is allowing 5.0 yards per attempt. Michigan's is 6.2. Ohio State's is 5.2. So Penn State and Ohio State are a little bit better in that category than Michigan is. And I mean, again, those things also equal out because if you look at the sack totals, which kind of I would factor that into the passing defense, Penn State has also been the most disruptive in that case. They have 20 sacks so far. Michigan has 15. Ohio State only has 7. So it seems like no matter how you look at it, those teams are just being more aggressive and they're being more disruptive in terms of just getting after the quarterback and kind of forcing tackles for loss, things like that. I don't know. I don't know what to think of that because obviously those are kind of a big discrepancy in sack numbers. However, I do think Ohio State's been getting after the quarterback, so I'm not really going to put too much weight into that. And then looking at, again, I was talking about ball disruption. Penn State has 6 interceptions. Michigan has 7, and Ohio State has 5. So, again, I mean, Michigan and Penn State both are a little more ball disruptive than Ohio State. But I think that the way that Ohio State's defense is being run this year, they're kind of being opportunistic, and I love that from them. That's one of the things that I think is the biggest difference from last year is Ohio State will let a team get 2 first downs maybe, but then somebody will make a play and stop them for like a 2nd and 10. And at that point, the mindset of the defense switches, and it's like, all right, let's lock up. This is our opportunity to get off the field right here. And then somebody makes a play. And, oftentimes teams have been going forward on 4th down against Ohio State, and I think they've been phenomenal in stopping that. So if you're 4th down in a yard and you're trying to get it, this defense is, it's going to be hard to get that yard on them because they're super aggressive in that situation. Now, a team could probably run like a trick play, like a pass or something in that situation and maybe get one off on Ohio State, but hopefully Jim Knowles is ready for that. I expect him to be. Yo, what's up, Rayshawn, man? How you doing, brother? I don't know if you've been in here the whole time, but I was just about to wrap the show up here. Do you guys have any questions or anything in the chat before we wrap up the show? As always, guys, hit the like button, share it with your friends, whatever, all that good stuff. But let me see. I was just talking about Ohio State, or I'm sorry, I keep saying Ohio State first because that's what the whole show was about. But anyway, I was just talking about the Big Three and their defenses this year. To me, I think that Penn State's defense has probably looked the best out of the Big Three and the Big Ten. But I think that each defense has their strength, and each defense has their weakness. And I can't wait to see those teams play each other because it's going to be super exciting. What's on the next show? I'm not sure yet, man. I haven't wrote it yet, so I'll get into that tonight, and then I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, but check it out because I'll be posting on there what it's all about. So my Twitter on the screen there, college football or CFB_stop. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap the show up. I know you just got in here, brother. Sorry about that, but thanks for watching, guys. You guys have a good day, and I'll be live tomorrow about 10 a.m. and we'll get it popping. Join late. What did I miss?